The Spit and the Secret. Chapter 1. The Kit. My daughter Lauren bought it for me as a birthday joke. 55, Mum, she said, sliding the box across the kitchen table with that grin she's had since she was 6 years old. Time to find out if we really are descended from Scottish royalty or if Gran was just having everyone on. The box was cheerful. Turquoise and white, printed with a little helix and the words, Heritage and You. Inside was a plastic tube, a barcode sticker, and a pamphlet full of exclamation marks. I turned it over in my hands the way you might handle a library book you're not sure you want to read. It's just a bit of fun, Lauren added, reading my expression. I suppose that's what everyone says. It sat on my kitchen counter for 3 weeks. I was busy doing what people do when they've just nudged their youngest out of the nest. I painted the spare bedroom, I reorganized the spice rack, I started a novel that had been sitting on my bedside table since Christmas. I was, for the first time in 27 years, accountable to no one between the hours of 7 in the morning and 7 at night. I was learning, rather awkwardly, to enjoy it. My name is Sarah Ellison. I was a primary school deputy head for 12 years, a mother for 27, and a wife for 23. Until David and I quietly agreed that we'd grown into people who made better friends than spouses. We still have Sunday dinner together when the children visit. It works, in the way that practical arrangements sometimes work better than romantic ones ever did. I am not dramatic by nature. I'm the person who reads the instructions before assembling flat-pack furniture. I look both ways twice. I am not, as a rule, the sort of woman who spits into a tube on a Wednesday afternoon out of idle curiosity and then has her entire understanding of her own life turned inside out. But that is precisely what happened. The results arrived by email 6 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning while I was eating toast and listening to Radio 4. I nearly deleted it. I'd half forgotten I'd posted the kit at all. Instead I clicked through, made a cup of tea, and settled at the table to learn that I am, apparently, 62% English, 21% Irish, and 11% Scandinavian. Gran's Scottish royalty theory was, as I'd suspected, entirely fabricated. I smiled at that. I was about to close the laptop when I noticed the tab along the side of the screen. DNA matches. I clicked it without thinking. There were dozens of distant cousins listed. Third cousins, fourth cousins, people with surnames I half recognized and people I'd never heard of. The algorithm ranked them by closeness of match. At the very top, highlighted in a different color, was a notice I didn't understand at first. It read, Law Enforcement Flag. Close familial match. Reference. Operation Clearwater. For further information, contact the National DNA Database Liaison Office. I stared at it for a long time. My tea went cold. Then I went and fetched my reading glasses, because I was quite certain I'd misread it. I hadn't. Chapter 2. The Case. Operation Clearwater. The name meant nothing to me, and then, slowly, it meant everything. I typed it into Google with the kind of focused dread usually reserved for symptoms you've been putting off looking up. The results came back immediately, because the internet never forgets what small-town newspapers have printed. Girl, 17, missing from Millhaven after summer dance. 1984. The photograph was black and white, slightly blurred. The way all newspaper photographs from that era look. As if the past itself is trying to stay out of focus. The girl's name was Diane Marsh. Dark hair cut to the jaw. A smile that looked like it cost her something. She had disappeared on the 14th of July, 1984. The night of the Millhaven Secondary School Leavers Dance. The same dance I'd attended, at the same school, in the same year. I graduated from Millhaven Secondary in 1984. I'd turned 17 that March. I'd worn a blue dress to that dance that my mother had sewn herself from a pattern in a magazine, and I'd danced with a boy called Tommy Bright who'd smelled of Brute aftershave and nerves. I remembered the gymnasium strung with crepe paper. I remembered the punch that someone had spiked. I did not remember Diane Marsh. The articles told me she had been a year below me, which is perhaps why. At 17, the year below might as well be a different species. She'd last been seen leaving the dance with an unidentified older man. Witnesses described him as in his late 20s or early 30s, dark-haired, driving a dark-colored Ford Cortina. A suspect had emerged early in the investigation. A local man named Robert Greaves, 29 years old, who worked at the grain merchants on the edge of town and had been seen speaking to Diane at the dance. He'd been questioned twice. Never charged. Robert Greaves. I said the name aloud in my quiet kitchen and it sat in the air like smoke. My mother's name had been Margaret Ellison, née Hartley. Her younger sister, my Aunt Patricia, had married a man named Dennis Greaves in 1979. Robert Greaves had been Dennis's younger brother. He had been, for several summers in my childhood, a fixture at family barbecues. He'd called me Little Sal and taught me to play drafts and smelled of cigarettes and engine oil. My mother had always been exceptionally fond of him. Fiercely fond, I could see now, looking back. The kind of fond that expresses itself as protectiveness. As closed doors. As, we don't need to talk about all that. Robert Greaves had died in 2019. Cancer, I thought I remembered. I'd sent flowers. I sat in my kitchen until lunchtime, reading everything the internet had to offer about a girl called Diane Marsh, and I felt something cold and steady settling in the base of my stomach, the way a stone settles to the bottom of a stream. The DNA flag meant that my genetic profile, my DNA, the unremarkable double helix that Lauren had bought me as a birthday joke, was a close familial match to material recovered from the original crime scene. Material that had never been explained. Material that had waited 40 years to find a name. The name it had found was mine. Or near enough to mine to matter. I didn't call the liaison office that day. Instead, I did what I always do when I'm frightened. I made a list. At the top, in capital letters, I wrote what I know. Underneath it, I wrote almost nothing. Because the truth was, I knew very little. I knew a flag on a website, a 40-year-old newspaper, and the fact that my mother had once been very protective of a man I'd barely thought about in decades. That night I dreamt of the gymnasium. The crepe paper. The spiked punch. In the dream, I finally looked across the room and saw Diane Marsh. Chapter 3. The Detective. His name was Frank Adler, and he found me before I found him. A week after I'd clicked on that notification, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. The voice at the other end was careful. The voice of a man who has spent a lifetime choosing his words with the precision of someone who knows they might one day be used against him. Mrs. Ellison? My name is Frank Adler. I'm a retired detective. I was with West Midlands Police for 31 years, the last 12 of them working cold cases. I was the lead investigator on the Diane Marsh disappearance from 2009 until my retirement in 2017. I've been in contact with the NDNAD liaison office. They've shared your registration details with me under the familial search protocol, and I was hoping we might have a conversation. I should have said I'd like to speak to a solicitor first. I probably should have said a great many sensible, cautious things. Instead I said, "How soon can you get here?" He arrived the following afternoon in a Navy saloon car that had seen better decades. He was 71 years old, white-haired, and walked with a slight hitch in his left hip that he clearly considered beneath his dignity to acknowledge. He had the quality I've noticed in certain ex-policemen and retired head teachers. A kind of compressed authority, like a spring that hasn't unwound yet and may not intend to. We sat at my kitchen table, where I had placed a pot of tea and a plate of biscuits, because hospitality is the armor I reach for when I'm uneasy. "I want to say first," Frank said, wrapping both hands around his mug, "that you are not a suspect. You couldn't be. You were 16 years old in 1984. The DNA flag is a familial match, which means we're looking at a biological relative of yours. Potentially a close one." "Robert Greaves," I said. He looked at me steadily. "You've done your research." "I'm a deputy head." "Was a deputy head." "Research is what we do when we're scared." Something shifted in his expression then. Not quite a smile, but the precursor to one. "Then you'll understand why I've been doing research for the better part of 16 years. Robert Greaves was my primary suspect. But the DNA evidence wasn't available in the way it is now, and he died before I could build a case I felt confident putting in front of the CPS. When your result came back, I thought." He stopped. "I thought perhaps it wasn't finished." "What do you need from me?" "Family history. Medical records, if you're willing. Anything that might help us trace the biological connection between your DNA and the material found at the scene." He paused. "And anything you remember about Robert Greaves? About your mother's relationship with him?" I told him what I knew, which wasn't much. Or rather, I told him what I remembered, which is a different thing. Memory is not a filing cabinet. It is a river, and things shift in it. I remembered Robert at family barbecues, at Christmas, once at a holiday in Weston-super-Mare. I remembered my mother laughing with him in the kitchen, and the way that laughter had a private quality, a closed-door quality that I'd understood as a child to mean this is not for you. I remembered, once, overhearing an argument between my mother and Aunt Patricia, in which my mother's voice had been very low and very hard and Patricia had been crying. I'd been 11, perhaps 12. I'd gone back to watching television. Your mother, Frank said carefully, may have known something. May have been protecting him. She's been dead for 8 years. I know, I'm sorry. We looked at each other across the table with the particular awkwardness of two people who have just established that the truth they're after can only be found by going back to a place neither of them particularly wants to go. I need to go back to Millhaven, I said. I think you do. Frank agreed. Will you come with me? He looked down at his mug, then up at me. I've been trying to get someone to take me back there for 6 years. Yes. I'll come. Chapter 4. The Town. Millhaven had been modest when I was a girl, and time had not made it grander. It had, however, made it prosperous in the peculiar way of small English towns that are close enough to a city to attract people escaping one artisan bakeries, a gastropub where the White Hart used to be, property prices that would have seemed fantastical in 1984. The old grammar school, my school, was now a block of luxury apartments. Someone had left the Iron School crest above the entrance portico, which I found either poignant or ironic, depending on which way the light was hitting it. We drove up on a Thursday in October, which is not the month that shows anywhere at its best. Frank drove. He was, I discovered, a man who processes thought through silence, which suited me well enough. We'd had 3 lengthy phone calls since our kitchen meeting and had established a working rhythm. I asked questions, he answered most of them. He asked questions, I answered all of them. It was, I thought, rather like being back in school, except that this time I was the one being assessed. The Millhaven Arms still existed, improbably. It was now called the Millhaven Arms and Boutique Rooms. But the bar smelled exactly as it had when I was 18 and sneaking in with false confidence. And the landlady was the daughter of the landlord I'd known. With the same broad face and the same directness that passes in the Midlands for friendliness. She recognized my name when I signed the register. Ellison. Margaret Ellison's girl? That's right. I remember your mom. Lovely woman. Hard as nails, but lovely. I've thought about that phrase ever since. The first person I'd arranged to see was Carol Finch, who had been Carol Hewitt in 1984 and was now Millhaven's deputy mayor, and the sort of woman who emails back within minutes regardless of the hour. We met in the cafe she'd specified. Neutral territory, her choice. And she arrived in a camel coat and a precision blow dry that spoke of a woman who controls her environment absolutely. Sarah. She kissed the air beside my cheek. God, you haven't changed. This was not true, but I returned the compliment, because some lies are kindnesses. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing. Children, retirements, the town's various improvements and decline. Before I said, as gently as I could, Carol, I need to ask you about the night of the Leavers' dance. About Diane Marsh. The precision blow dry didn't move. But something behind Carol's eyes did. That's a very long time ago. It is. Why are you asking? Because I've had reason to. I can't tell you more than that yet. She looked at me for a long moment. Outside, someone walked past the window with a pushchair. And the ordinary world pressed briefly against the glass and then moved on. I saw her leave, Carol said finally. With a man. Older. I didn't know him. I thought. She stopped. I thought she'd pulled. That was what we said. I thought she'd pulled and she was lucky, because he was handsome. A pause. I told the police at the time. They said I hadn't seen anything useful. Did you recognize him? At all? No. But. She hesitated. Your mother was there. She'd come to help chaperone, you remember, because Mrs. Denton was ill. And she saw them too. I remember because she went very still when she saw them. The way you go still when you've seen something you weren't expecting. She met my eyes. I always thought that was odd. I thought about it for years and then I stopped thinking about it because what else do you do? I drove back to the hotel with my hands very steady on the wheel and my mind somewhere else entirely. Frank was waiting in the bar with 2 glasses of something amber. He'd been to see an old contact at the local station. Someone who'd worked the original investigation and was now long retired. He slid a piece of paper across the table to me without a word. It was a copy of a witness statement. The witness was listed as M. Ellison. My mother had told them she'd seen nothing. I sat with that for a long time. The amber liquid. The old bar. Outside, Millhaven went quietly about its Thursday evening, and I tried to reconcile the mother I had known. Capable, warm, hard as nails but lovely. With the woman who had looked at a handsome man walking out with a teenage girl, and decided that what she knew was best kept in the dark. She would have had reasons, Frank said, not unkindly. I know. Family. Loyalty. Fear of what would happen to her sister's marriage if it all came out. I know. I looked at him. It doesn't make it right. No. He said. It doesn't. That night I lay in my boutique room with the window cracked open. And listened to the town I grew up in. Doing what all towns do after dark. Settling into itself, traffic thinning. A dog barking at something it couldn't name. And I thought about my mother. I thought about what it costs a person to know something and say nothing for 40 years. Whether it sits quietly or whether it accumulates, like sediment, like weight. Whether she'd looked at me sometimes and thought, If you knew what I know, you'd think differently of me. I would have, I think. And also, I think, now, with some difficulty, I might have understood it. That's the thing about the people we lose. They become more complicated after they've gone. Chapter 5. The Reckoning. The answer, in the end, came not from the police or the database or the careful brick-by-brick reconstruction that Frank had spent 16 years attempting. It came from a cardboard box in my Aunt Patricia's spare room in Leamington Spa, on a wet Friday afternoon, with a pot of Earl Grey and a plate of digestives and a woman I had always thought I knew. Patricia was 81 now. She'd been diagnosed with macular degeneration the previous year, and moved slowly through her own house, navigating by habit and muscle memory. She had Dennis's photograph on the mantelpiece. He'd died in 2004. And Robert's beside it, a younger Robert, grinning, squinting into summer sun. When I'd called ahead to ask if I could come and look through some old family things, she'd said yes with a readiness that surprised me, and when I arrived, there was a box already on the kitchen table. "I've been waiting," she said simply, "for someone to ask." She had known since 1984. Not everything. She hadn't known about Diane Marsh specifically. Not until the investigation had surfaced and Robert's name had appeared in the papers. But she had known that he had done something terrible. She had known because my mother had told her. Not in detail, never the details she'd locked away, but enough. Enough to know. And Patricia had made the same calculation my mother had made, the calculation of a woman in her early 40s in 1984, with a husband she loved, and a marriage she depended on, and a brother-in-law she was frightened of, and a sister who was asking her, quietly, desperately, to say nothing. "Mags never forgave herself," Patricia said. The digestive in her hand had gone untouched. Not really. She thought if she'd spoken up immediately. That night, not weeks later when the police were asking, they'd have caught him. She thought about Diane Marsh every day. She told me so. Why didn't she tell anyone? Later, when it might still have mattered? Because by then he'd threatened her. She said it flatly, without drama, as though she'd rehearsed saying it 1,000 times in an empty room. He came to see her, just the two of them. He told her that if she said anything, he'd say things about her. Make things up. He was that sort of man. A pause. Dennis didn't know. I never told Dennis. That's my own thing to carry. The box contained letters. 40 years of them, written by my mother and sent to Patricia, and at the bottom a sealed envelope in my mother's handwriting with my name on it. My name. Sarah. And under it, in smaller letters. For when you need to know. I don't know how she knew I'd come looking. Perhaps she didn't. Perhaps she'd written it and sealed it and given it to Patricia and said, "Keep this." And perhaps the letter had been sitting at the bottom of a cardboard box for 8 years, and perhaps it was never fate or prescience, just a woman who knew her daughter well enough to know that Sarah Ellison, given time and reason, would eventually go looking for the truth. That she would find her way, eventually, to the box. I read it in the car, with Frank beside me and the rain on the windscreen and Patricia watching us from the front door until we drove away. My mother wrote simply. She always had. She wrote that she was sorry. Not to me, not exactly. But to Diane Marsh, to Diane Marsh's parents, who were both dead by the time the letter was written but whose absence she had carried. She wrote that she had been a coward and that she had been afraid and that these were explanations, not excuses, and she understood the difference. She wrote that she had loved Robert as one loves someone who is family before they show you what they are, and that she had not known what to do with the love afterwards, and that she had mostly buried it under silence because silence was the only thing she could control. She wrote, "I hope you don't hate me. I think you might. I think I'd understand it if you did. But I hope, in time, you'll see that I was frightened, and that frightened people make small, terrible choices, and that a life is not only its worst decision. I sat with that for a long time. Then I handed the letter to Frank, because he had earned it, and I looked out at the rain on the street, and I let myself feel all of it at once. The grief for my mother that had never quite resolved itself after 8 years. The fury at what she'd chosen. The sorrow for a 17-year-old girl with a jaw-length dark bob who'd smiled at the camera as though it cost her something, and hadn't come home from a dance in the summer of 1984. It took Frank a long time to read it. When he'd finished, he folded it carefully and gave it back to me. "It's not enough for a charge," he said. "He's dead. It won't lead to a prosecution." "I know. But the family. Diane's family. There's a brother, he's in his 60s now, still in the area. He's been asking for information for 40 years. He paused. "The letter, combined with the DNA evidence and your aunt's statement. It's not a conviction. But it's an answer. It's what happened. Will it be enough? For him?" Frank was quiet for a moment. Outside, the rain eased slightly, and a thin winter light came through, the kind that doesn't quite commit. "In my experience," he said, "it's never exactly enough. But it's better than nothing. It's better than the nothing he's been living with." I thought about that. About the particular weight of not knowing, which is different from the weight of a hard truth. How not knowing is formless, how it expands to fill whatever space you give it. How a hard truth, however painful, has edges. You can put your hands on it. You can decide what to do with something you can hold. "All right," I said. "Then let's go and give it to him." We found Paul Marsh in a semi-detached in Coventry. In a sitting room full of his late wife's plants that he was keeping alive with evident effort and no natural aptitude. He was 62, a retired mechanic, a man with his sister's dark hair gone mostly gray. He made us tea without asking if we wanted it, because that is what you do in the Midlands when something is happening that requires steadiness. Frank told him most of it. I told him the rest. When I gave him the photocopied letter, I'd kept the original. I hope that was right. He read it once, quickly, and then held it against his chest for a moment with his eyes closed, as though the paper itself was something to be steadied against. "Thank you," he said. "That was all. Thank you." It wasn't justice. I want to be clear about that. Justice would have required Robert Greaves to stand in a courtroom and have his choices read aloud to him. Justice would have required the full weight of the law and the full exposure of what he'd done. We had none of that, and we were not going to get it. What we had was the truth, spoken plainly in a sitting room in Coventry, to the one person who most needed to hear it. It was not enough. And it was not nothing. I drove home in the dark, alone. Frank had a train to catch. And I thought about my mother most of the way. I thought about what it costs to carry a secret for 40 years, and whether the carrying of it changes you, and how you'd even know. I thought about Lauren, and whether she'd notice anything different in me when she next called. I thought about the DNA kit with its cheerful turquoise packaging, and the peculiar ruthlessness of the digital age. Its willingness to surface the past without warning or mercy or any particular regard for your Tuesday morning plans. I thought about Diane Marsh, too. About the woman she might have been. 60 now, perhaps, if the world had gone differently. If a man had made a different choice on a summer night when the gymnasium was strung with crepe paper and the punch was spiked, and a 17-year-old girl with a jaw-length dark bob had smiled at someone who seemed handsome and left with him into the dark. I thought I would like to have known her. When I got home, I did what I always do after a hard day. I made tea. I sat at my kitchen table. I looked at the stack of papers Frank and I had accumulated over the past 6 weeks. statements, articles, photocopies, printouts. And I thought about what to do with them. In the morning, I called Lauren. "The DNA kit," I said when she answered. "You were right. It was interesting." A pause. "Mom, you sound weird. Are you okay?" "I'm all right," I said. And I was. In the way you're all right when something has changed irreversibly. And you've come through the other side. And the world is still there. And the tea is still tea, and the kitchen is still the kitchen, and you are still yourself. If not quite the version of yourself you were 6 weeks ago. I've got rather a lot to tell you. Can you come for the weekend? I'll drive up Saturday morning. Good. I looked out the window at the garden, which wanted cutting back, which I would get to in the spring. Bring your sister if she's free. I'll make that lamb thing you like. After we'd run off, I sat for a while with the quiet. My quiet kitchen, my ordinary retirement. My life that had looked 6 weeks ago, at 55, with the children grown and the job done and the house to myself at last. Quite pleasingly simple. It was still mine. All of it. It had just turned out to contain more than I'd expected. But then, I think about this now. What life doesn't?